Well, the thing is the LA scene in the 80s, that same neighborhood, sort of West Hollywood, the club scene, was a melting pot for musicians and creative people all the way back to the 60s. So that scene was always really vibrant and always very electric, and there was always lots of stuff coming out of there. From the 60s through the 70s and through the 80s, you had heavy metal and punk rock, you had folk music, you had singer-songwriter music, you had all these things that were all just really bright and alive in that whole thing. The 80s for me was it was, at least there was a scene, but Guns N' Roses wasn't part of that scene. We were sort of the antithesis of what that was all about, and that's one of the things that made Guns N' Roses, before it got big, when it was just a club band, we were sort of like the anti-80s club scene band, but we were coming up in that same area. So everybody, we were like the bad guys, but it was fun. I mean, now that whole area is completely dead. There's nothing, it hasn't been anything happening there since really since the early 90s. It's pretty much just stopped in 1989, 1990, and it just died.
Mid 80s is when I started to actually participate and do this art form. It always just kind of spoke to me when I saw art in the street. I gravitated towards it. I loved it. It somehow struck a nerve or an emotion.
Did you ever go with me down in the tunnel on
Olympic
and spray paint in the tunnel?
Yeah, the Titus Sloan piece. I remember that.
I used to promote my very first band. We used to go and spray paint and shit.
Yeah, Slash actually is a really talented artist and had some dope hand styles with his letters and stuff, as I recall. For me, it was this, the beginning of this movement, beginning of this art form. Now it's become like a global art form. So to watch this thing kind of spread and then pop up all over the place, and to be interpreted through these different countries and that all have different kind of influences, like the art that's coming out of Europe, to me is phenomenal. It's better than a lot of the stuff coming out of the States that, so we kind of pioneered this art form, and then it's been reinterpreted through these other communities that maybe have a deeper, richer artistic kind of upbringing, because art's more appreciated and understood maybe in Europe than it is in America. So it's still, has kind of a dark cloud that follows it. When people see graffiti, they think of gang tags and just vandalism and crime, but there's a really, like, a lot of raw talent out there. These kids have chosen this medium to express themselves. But, I created this hub, this platform to kind of expose these artists that I was connected to or somehow had been introduced to. But to kind of see the whole thing grow and become like there's, art coming out of Africa, little places like Guam, spots I've never heard of that somehow they've connected, they relate, they've reinterpreted, they're doing, their thing. It's all still very like American influenced and, exciting for me. It's, every time I go fucking on Instagram and I see some piece in some place I never thought of, influential in that movement or whatever. And even with all these other companies that are existing today, the Supremes and whatever, Conart had a big influence, whether they like to admit it or not. We laid the fucking foundation for this whole subculture of streetwear and so,
it was really pioneering back then.